What's the greatest physique that ever graced a bodybuilding stage? Many would say it belonged to Kenneth "Flex" Wheeler. A man who possessed perhaps the most genetically gifted body in bodybuilding history. Yet his story is not just about muscle and trophies. It's about survival, identity, and the battle between the person we show the world and who we really are inside. August 23, 1965. Fresno, California. A city where poverty ran deep and hope was hard to find. This is where Kenneth Wheeler was born. From the very beginning his childhood was a nightmare. Homelessness. Hunger. Abuse. A single mother doing her best but unable to shield her son from a harsh world. Kenneth would later recall going to sleep with dirty clothes and socks that smelled so bad he wouldn't take his shoes off at school. He remembered turning bedroom lights on and off to scare away the rats that ran around his room. The neighborhood was racially charged and dangerous. Police corruption was rampant. There were certain areas you simply didn't go to. On top of the poverty and violence, Kenneth struggled in school due to dyslexia. Back then they didn't understand learning disabilities. Teachers just thought these kids were stupid. Kenneth would write like a 2-year-old and had immense difficulty reading and spelling. This condition would follow him throughout his life, causing him to miss out on movie roles and commercials because he couldn't read scripts. These experiences left deep scars. The young boy began having dark thoughts, questioning whether life was worth living. He desperately wanted to be accepted, to walk into a room without being judged. The trauma created an insecurity that would haunt him for decades. Despite the chaos, Kenneth found purpose in martial arts. At the local recreation center, he discovered he had natural fighting ability. His instructor became a mentor who later said Kenneth was probably 100 times better as a fighter than he ever was as a bodybuilder. But there was no money in martial arts back then. Even with his incredible fighting skills, Kenneth couldn't bring himself to hurt bullies who picked on him. He was afraid of seriously injuring someone. This gentleness in the face of his own suffering revealed the true character beneath the tough exterior he would later develop. At 9 years old, Kenneth started lifting weights with his brother Darnell and friend Mike Garza in Mike's backyard. They called him Skinny Kenny. He weighed only 98 pounds when he graduated high school. The workouts were basic: bench press, curls, and push-ups. His motivation was simple: look good at track meets and catch girls' attention. At 15, with barely any knowledge of bodybuilding, Flex entered a local competition just for fun. He had no routine, no posing trunks, just a pair of burgundy underwear. His grandmother said he looked like a greased-up something in her beautiful way of not understanding what he was doing. But older bodybuilders noticed something special. They told him he had good genetics. Around this time, Kenneth became a father to a baby girl, adding another layer of responsibility to his already challenging life. At 18, he made the decision to take his first anabolic steroid cycle. The transformation was dramatic: 30 pounds of muscle in just over a month. He would stare at himself in the mirror, worried the muscles belonged to someone else. In 1985, Kenneth won the Teen America title. It was around this time that he got his nickname. At 14, kids would tease him saying he walked around flexing all the time. So he started using Flex Wheeler and it stuck. By 1989, he claimed the MPC California Championships. You could see the dramatic transformation in his physique. He looked like one of those muscle dolls with exaggerated proportions. But he was still far from ready for the highest levels of competition. Bodybuilding has always been expensive. The food, supplements, and time all come at a price. For Flex, the price was too high. He nearly walked away, choosing stability over his dreams. He put down the weights and picked up a badge, becoming a police officer with the Fresno Sheriff Department, working in the jail system. However, his career as a cop was short-lived. He realized his true calling was bodybuilding and decided to pursue it full-time. In 1991, a friend introduced him to the legendary Joe Weider. Meeting Joe was like entering bodybuilding royalty. His office was filled with history, trophies, paintings, decades of the sport's evolution. Not everyone got the opportunity to even communicate with Joe Weider. But Flex's road to professional status wasn't smooth. He suffered 2 disappointing losses while earning his pro card. First, he lost to Mike Matarazzo at the USA Championships. Then at Nationals, he faced one of the greatest amateur lineups ever, Kevin Levrone, Ronnie Coleman, Chris Cormier, and Matt Mendenhall. Kevin earned his pro card that day while Flex had to wait another year. After his defeat in 1991, Flex sat on the steps and cried. But those losses only fueled his hunger for victory. He worked harder than ever, determined that next time he would leave nothing to chance. 1992. The NBC USA Championships. Flex arrived transformed. The difference from 91 to 92 was incredible. He was bigger, harder, more detailed. His side chest pose became legendary. His hamstring development showed striations that made everyone take notice. He won with a perfect score, earning his pro card at 27 years old. What happened next was unprecedented. Flex launched the best IFBB pro debut in bodybuilding history. At the 1993 Ironman Pro, he defeated amazing competition including Lee Labrada, Vince Taylor, and Paul Dillett. 1 week later at the Arnold Classic, he presented what many consider one of the greatest physiques ever to grace a stage. The 1993 Arnold Classic version of Flex Wheeler is often called the most aesthetic physique in bodybuilding history. He looked sensational from every angle. Rock hard everywhere. His back, legs, delts, tight waist, massive arms, everything was perfect. The separation between his individual tricep heads was insane. You virtually never see this level of detail today. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger was blown away, calling him one of the best bodybuilders of all time. Arnold was amazed by Flex's flexibility, saying he had never seen anyone in bodybuilding history who could do the splits while posing. 2 competitions in 2 weeks. 2 championships. The Ironman paid $10,000 and the Arnold paid $80,000. That was $90,000 in 1 week, more than Flex had made in his entire life up to that point. For his first Olympia in 1993, Flex was ready to challenge the reigning champion Dorian Yates. The lineup was incredible: Shawn Ray, Paul Dillett, Kevin Levrone, Lee Labrada, and the mass monster himself, Dorian Yates. Flex brought the perfect package. The right size, symmetry, and conditioning like no one had seen before. Everyone who was there said not only was Flex in his best condition ever, but it was the best conditioning anyone had ever seen before. Dorian Yates himself admitted that Flex probably had more natural talent than him. He said Flex looked like that giving only 70% effort. What if he gave another 20 or 30%? The contrast was clear. Dorian had the criticized midsection while Flex's waist was his strong point. Flex's conditioning was incredible. His shape, structure, aesthetics, lines, proportion, and symmetry were all incredible. The question for the judges was whether aesthetics would beat size and mass. While many believed Flex deserved to win, he was more than happy with second place. That shy poor boy from the ghetto who didn't always fit in was now the talk of the bodybuilding world. He had taken second at his very first Olympia. 4 pro shows and he was ranked number 2 in the world. But success for Kenneth was a double-edged sword. The persona of Flex Wheeler was starting to take over. He had unknowingly created an alter ego, this Flex Wheeler character who was confident, untouchable, and sometimes arrogant. Deep down, he was still that traumatized kid from Fresno. 1994 should have been Flex's year. Dorian Yates came to the Olympia injured, seeming vulnerable. But for Flex, the Olympia was the last thing on his mind. He was fighting for his life. In August 1994, after a night out with rapper Dr. Dre, Flex was driving home at 2:30 in the morning when his front tire blew out. The car spun around backwards and crashed. The accident fractured his neck in 2 places. His eye was swollen, his ear was ripped. For an entire month, all he could do was lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. The crash didn't just threaten his career, it almost killed him. He lost sponsorship deals while lying in the hospital. He lost his house and car because he had no means of making money. He thought he would be able to compete at the Olympia until 3 days before, when doctors finally said forget about it. Watching his rivals compete from the audience was devastating. While they were on stage, he was grappling with personal issues far beyond bodybuilding form. He saw competitors like Paul Dillett and Nasser El Sombaty change their size game and wondered how he would ever catch back up. Against doctors' advice, Flex returned to the gym. Within months he was regaining his incredible physique. His genetic gifts were undeniable. He could take a 20-pound dumbbell and transform before your eyes in 20 minutes. It was the kind of genetics that made other bodybuilders angry because you couldn't explain it. In 1995, he made his comeback, winning the Night of Champions and Iron Pro with a beautiful aesthetic physique. He proved to himself that he could still compete at the highest level after breaking his neck in 2 different places. He went to defend his Arnold Classic title, but in a controversial decision, Mike Francois took the win, leaving Flex in 2nd place. The next year, he lost again at the Arnold, this time to Kevin Levrone, who was making his own comeback from a pectoral tear. This created a heated rivalry between Flex and Kevin. Both were hungry, both had something to prove. They would give each other hell on stage and in interviews. Kevin said he didn't knock on doors, he knocked them down. Flex responded saying maybe he should train lighter and be as good as Kevin, or maybe Kevin should train harder and be as good as him. It was a fun rivalry built on mutual respect and competitive fire. During this period, Flex had a complicated relationship with fellow competitor Shawn Ray. Their relationship was a constant battle of egos. Shawn would torment Flex in magazines and interviews, believing Flex had mental weaknesses. The rivalry got so intense that Flex contemplated violence, planning to show up at Shawn's door late one night. But beneath all the bravado, Flex was still that insecure kid from the streets. The persona he had created, the confident, cocky superstar, was just a mask. He was trying to hide Kenny Wheeler, who felt like nothing. Flex lived a life of luxury during his peak years. Flashy cars, big houses, a lifestyle filled with celebrities and women. He couldn't leave the house without having at least $10,000 in his pocket. He spent money and burned through everything because he lived like he wasn't going to be around long. He formed a legendary trio at Gold's Venice with Chris Cormier and Rico McClinton. They were like a gang, you couldn't mess with one without all 3 coming at you. But their lives were a storm of chaos. Drugs, fights, women, and money created a whirlwind that left little space for peace. Rico was the mature leader of their group who kept Flex and Chris from tearing each other apart. Without Rico's calm presence, the friendship might not have survived their competitive nature and volatile personalities. In 1997, everything seemed to align for Flex. He won his 2nd Arnold Classic title, impressing Arnold himself, who declared Flex his favorite bodybuilder. Arnold was speechless seeing Flex return from the car accident to reclaim his title. Off stage, Flex's life seemed golden too. He married and welcomed 3 more children, adding to the 2 he already had. He settled into a beautiful home in California with his new bride Melanie, becoming a family man for the first time. With this momentum, Flex entered the 1997 Olympia as the favorite to dethrone the injured Dorian Yates. Many believed this was finally Flex's time to claim the title that had eluded him. But 48 hours before the competition, everything changed. Flex arrived at the host hotel with his left forearm and hand bandaged, claiming he had been a victim of an unsuccessful carjacking 6 days prior. According to Flex, violent people dressed as ninjas had injured him during the attempted robbery. Very few people in the bodybuilding community believed what became known as the ninja story. Fans thought Flex made it up to avoid competing while out of shape. The fact that he left this incident out of his autobiography only fueled more skepticism. This was especially frustrating for fans because 1997 was the year many thought Flex could have finally beaten Dorian Yates, who was in the worst shape of his career. With Dorian retiring, the stage was set for a new champion. For many fans, there was no question who that champion would be: Flex Wheeler. He was the clear favorite heading into the 1998 Olympia in New York. But no one predicted what happened next. Out of nowhere came Ronnie Coleman, a competitor who had finished ninth at the previous Olympia and was far from anyone's radar as a serious contender. Ronnie brought a combination of size and conditioning never seen before. Even Flex was shocked, looking at Ronnie's back and thinking it was more detailed than his own famously feathered back development. The irony was that Flex had mentored Ronnie in the past. Back in 1994, when Flex was winning shows, Ronnie had approached him asking for advice. Ronnie had been competing naturally and was getting beaten badly. Flex gave him some guidance about supplementation, though perhaps not his best advice. When they met again at the Olympia, Ronnie had transformed completely. The student had become the master. Ronnie didn't even think he could win, he was expecting maybe 4th or 5th place. But when they called his name for 1st place, even he was shocked. Flex knew he had to respond. He spent the entire off-season preparing like never before. For the 1999 Olympia, he brought the most disciplined version of himself yet. He was 15 pounds heavier than his previous best and believed in himself like never before. The 1999 lineup may have been the most stacked in Olympia history. Ronnie Coleman, Flex Wheeler, Kevin Levrone, Chris Cormier, Sean Ray, Nasser El Sonbody, Paul Dillett, Lee Priest, Jay Cutler, Dexter Jackson. It was an incredible collection of talent. Backstage, everyone told Flex he had Ronnie beat. For the first time ever, Flex truly believed he could win. He had done everything right in his preparation. His conditioning was perfect, his size was there, and his confidence was unshakable. But when the decision came, Flex found himself in 2nd place once again. Despite his best efforts, the Olympia curse persisted. He had earned the nickname of the uncrowned king of Mr. Olympia. After receiving another 2nd place trophy, Flex's frustration boiled over. He declared that the trophy represented number 2, but he wasn't number 2, he was number 1 in his heart. Joe Weider later told him it wasn't that he wasn't good enough to win, but that bodybuilding was a business. The 1999 British Grand Prix shortly after featured many of the same legendary competitors. This event is forever etched in bodybuilding history, with several athletes bringing their all-time best conditions. It felt like the 90s bodybuilding era was saying its final goodbye. In 2000, at just 35 years old, Flex was diagnosed with focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, a rare and aggressive kidney disease. Most kidney diseases of this type typically strike later in life, but for Flex it hit too early. He realized how much damage he had done to himself over the years. What he had been running from, he had run right into. The lifestyle of excess had consequences he could no longer ignore. Watching his best friend Rico change his life overnight made it clear that Flex needed to change too. Rico had found religion and completely transformed: no more partying, no more cursing, no more destructive behavior. Rico was too embarrassed to even talk to Flex about his transformation because he knew how far off the chain Flex had become. By 2002, Flex decided to compete naturally without anabolic steroids. Blood tests confirmed no banned substances in his system. He competed at a lighter weight, placed 7th, and retired from bodybuilding. A year later, Flex's kidneys were failing and he needed a transplant to survive. He underwent the procedure and endured 11 painful surgeries in just 9 weeks. Throughout his lifetime, he would have over 60 surgeries total. After retiring from bodybuilding, Flex returned to his martial arts roots. But in 2017, at 52 years old, he decided to compete one last time in the newly created Classic Physique division at the Olympia. There he stood alongside a young Chris Bumstead who was making his debut. Seeing Flex on stage after everything he had been through was truly amazing. He had spent over 2 years in the hospital with multiple surgeries, yet there he was, showing everyone that you don't have to give up on life. Life continued to test Flex's resilience. In October 2019, he was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery on his right leg due to complications from a collapsed vein. When he woke up, his right leg had been partially amputated. The psychological adjustment was devastating. He would sometimes forget and try to get out of bed using his right leg, nearly falling when he realized it wasn't there. Phantom pain would torment him constantly. On top of the physical challenges, Flex faced financial struggles. Looking back, one of his biggest regrets was not starting his own business when he was at his peak like other bodybuilders did. He had relied on being paid by companies only to be left behind when they no longer needed him. Today, Flex is living with stage 3 kidney failure. His doctors have warned him that he is at risk of losing his remaining leg and possibly both arms. Yet through all of this, Flex has finally found peace. He lives with his family now, 5 children and 5 grandchildren. He realized that his worth isn't defined by his cars or his once perfect physique. True peace lies far beyond material success. Flex has taken control of his destiny, starting his own business as a successful body transformation coach and launching his own supplement line. Nearly 30 years after winning his first Arnold Classic title, he received the Arnold Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. He now accepts himself completely. His value isn't based on his car or who he's married to, but on the value he feels within himself. He's living as Kenny Wheeler for the first time in his life, not hiding behind the Flex Wheeler persona. To this day, whenever a new athlete shows off an aesthetic physique, people are quick to compare him to Flex Wheeler. We hear it all time, the new Flex Wheeler. But there will only ever be one original, and his name is Kenny. No matter what era you're born in, Flex Wheeler's name will always be mentioned among the greatest. The respect he gets from his peers and fans means more to him than any Olympia trophy could. His story teaches us that perfection isn't about trophies or titles. It's about accepting yourself, overcoming adversity, and finding peace with who you really are. Flex Wheeler may have been called the uncrowned king, but in the end, he became something more valuable. He became himself. Kenneth Flex Wheeler. The most genetically gifted bodybuilder who ever lived. The man who showed us that true strength isn't measured in pounds lifted or trophies won, but in the courage to keep fighting when everything seems lost. His legacy will live on forever, not just in the sport of bodybuilding, but in the hearts of everyone who refuses to give up on their dreams.